to Storytime with Soul Guru. Today we'll continue our journey in the Sands of Destiny, Chapter 4, Reflections of the Past. Professor Amelia Winter led the way. Her sharp eyes scanned the walls for any signs of traps or further puzzles. Behind her, Ethan Hart stayed close, his mind still buzzing from the intense emotion he had just experienced with Lila. The memory of their shared kiss lingered in his thoughts, but the gravity of the situation kept him focused. Lila Morgan walked beside Ethan, her hand still wrapped in a makeshift bandage. The sacrifice she had made had been symbolic, but the pain had been real. She felt the weight of the group's survival pressing down on her. Though she knew she wasn't alone in bearing it, her eyes darted to Ethan occasionally, but she kept her thoughts to herself, knowing there would be time to talk later if they made it out alive. Sammy Patel and Maya Rodriguez followed closely behind, their usual banter subdued as they took in their surroundings. Maya, ever the practical one, kept her sense on high alert. She carried a sturdy flashlight, its narrow beam cutting through the darkness ahead. Tommy Hart, Ethan's younger brother, was trying his best to stay brave. He admired Ethan more than anyone in the world, and though fear yawned at his inside, he kept pushing forward, determined to prove he was just as courageous as his older brother. The passage led them deeper into the labyrinthine structure, the walls closing in on them as the air grew colder. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a vast chamber, larger than any they had encountered before. The room was circular, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into the darkness. In the centre of the chamber stood an enormous ornate mirror, its surface smooth and flawless despite its obvious age. The mirror seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, drawing the group closer despite the unease it inspired. Professor Winter approached it cautiously, her breath catching as she examined the frame. It was covered in hieroglyphs and symbols that she didn't recognize, symbols that were far older than the pyramids, older than any civilization she had studied. "This isn't just a mirror," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "It's an artifact of immense power, something that transcends time and space." Ethan stepped closer, peering into the mirror's reflective surface. At first, he saw only their reflections: himself, Lila, Sammy, Maya, Tommy, and Professor Winter, staring back at them. But then the image began to shift. The chamber around them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a barren desert landscape under a blood-red sky. "What's happening?" Maya asked, her voice tight with tension. Before anyone could respond, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and a cold wind swept through the chamber. Ethan and Lila felt their tug first. Their bodies suddenly yanked forward, as if an invisible hand had grabbed hold of them. Professor Winter, standing closest to the mirror, was the next to be pulled in. The rest of the group watched in horror as the three of them were sucked into the mirror. Their bodies disappeared into the depths. "Ethan! Lila!" Tommy screamed, reaching out for his brother, but it was too late. They were gone. Sammy and Maya rushed forward, but the mirror's surface had returned to its original state, reflecting only the two of them, and now the empty chamber. "We have to get them out of there," Maya said, her voice filled with urgency. But no matter what they tried, the mirror remained unyielding, its surface smooth and cold. On the other side, Ethan, Lila, and Professor Winter landed hard on the cracked, dry earth of the mirror realm. Disoriented and breathless, they scrambled to their feet, taking in their surrounding. The desert they had glimpsed in the mirror now surrounded them, the oppressive heat contrasting sharply with the cold, lifeless sky. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth and something darker, something that smelled of death. "Where are we?" Lila gasped, her voice trembling. Professor Winter looked around, her expression grim. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we're not in the real world anymore. This is some kind of mirror realm, a reflection of reality, twisted and dangerous." Ethan helped Lila to her feet, his heart pounding. "We need to find a way out," he said, trying to sound confident. "There has to be an exit." But as they started to move, the ground beneath them began to shake. Cracks formed in the earth, and from them emerged creatures that made their blood freeze in their veins. Mummies. Their decayed bodies wrapped in tattered bandages rose from the ground, their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and their movements were slow but purposeful. Professor Winter grabbed Ethan's arm, her voice urgent. "We need to move now!" The trio bolted, running as fast as they could across the barren landscape. The mummies were slow but relentless. Their decayed hands reached out for them with every step. "Over there!" Ethan shouted, pointing to a rocky outcrop in the distance. "We can use it as cover." They sprinted towards the rocks, their hearts pounding in their chests. The mummies were gaining on them, their grotesque forms illuminated by the blood-red sky. Lila's foot caught on a loose stone and she stumbled, nearly falling. Ethan caught her just in time, pulling her back to her feet. "Keep going," he urged, not daring to look back. They reached the rocks, scrambling up the incline just as the mummies closed in. Professor Winter reached to the top first, her breath coming in rage gasps. She turned to help the others, but something caught her eye, a glint of metal, half buried in the dirt near the base of the rocks. "Ethan, Lila," she called out, pointing to the object. "There's something down there." Ethan and Lila followed her gaze, spotting the metal object. Lila scrambled down, digging it out of the dirt. It was a small, rusty canister, a relic from another town. "What is it?" Ethan asked, watching as Lila examined the find. "A deodorant can," Lila replied, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But it's ancient. How did it get here?" Professor Winter's eyes widened as she realised the potential of their discovery. This place is a reflection of reality, but it's twisted. Items from different times could have ended up here. "Lila, do you still have your lighter?" Lila nodded, pulling a small lighter from her backpack. She had brought it along for emergencies. Never imagined she would use it for something like this. "We can use this as a makeshift blowtorch," Professor Winter explained, her mind racing. "The mummies are dry, ancient. If we set them on fire, it might cause a chain reaction." Without wasting another moment, Lila rigged the deodorant can with the lighter, creating a crude but effective weapon. The mummies were closing in, their bandaged hand reaching out for them, the scent of decay growing stronger with every step. "Ready?" Lila asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Ready," Ethan and Professor Winter replied in unison. With a deep breath, Lila pressed down on the lighter, igniting the spray from the canister. A jet of flame shot out as she directed it at the nearest mummy. The ancient, dry bandages caught fire immediately, the flames spreading rapidly across its body. The mummy let out a horrible guttural sound as it was engulfed in flames, its limbs flailing wildly. The fire quickly spread to the other mummies, their bodies igniting like dry kindling. The air was filled with the acrid smell of burning flesh and the eerie wailing cries of the mummies as they were consumed by the flames. "It's working!" Ethan shouted, his voice filled with both relief and horror. The flames spread faster than they could have imagined, jumping from one mummy to the next in a deadly chain reaction. The heat was intense, forcing the trio to retreat further up the rocks. But just as they thought they were safe, a new threat emerged. The ground began to shake violently, and from the cracks in the earth, a swarm of flesh-eating scarabs poured out, their shiny black bodies glittering in the firelight. "Get to higher ground!" Professor Winter shouted, her voice filled with urgency. They scrambled up the rocks, but the scarabs were fast. Their chittering filled the air as they swarmed over the burning mummies, devouring what little remained. Ethan, Lila and Professor Winter reached the top of the rocks, but the scarabs were relentlessly climbing up the rocky outcrop with terrifying speed. Lila turned the blowtorch on, but there were too many, far too many. Professor Winter grabbed Ethan and Lila and pushed them towards the other side of the rocks. "Go! Get to the mirror, I'll hold them off." Ethan's eyes widened with horror. "No! We're not leaving you!" "There's no time to argue," she snapped, her voice fierce. "You have to get back. The others are counting on you." Tears filled Lila's eyes as she realised what Professor Winter intended to do. "We can't just leave you here. You have to." Back in the chamber, Tommy, Maya and Sammy stood in stunned silence. Their eyes were fixed on the mirror. They had just swallowed their friends and Professor Winter. The surface had returned to its normal reflective state, showing nothing but their own frightened faces and the empty chamber behind them. We need to do something, Tommy said, his voice shaken but determined. He stepped closer to the mirror, his hand clenched into a fist. We have to get them back. Maya placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We will, Tommy, but we need to think this through. Rushing in without a plan won't help Ethan or the others. Sammy, always the one to look for some solution, started examining the chamber. There has to be something here that can help us, he muttered, more to himself than the others. He scanned the walls, the floor, and the ceiling, looking for anything out of the ordinary. The chamber was large and dimly lit, the only light coming from the torches they had brought with them. The stone walls covered the ancient carvings, hieroglyphs that seemed to tell a story, though none of them could decipher it. Sammy's eyes fell on a series of symbols near the base of the mirror. He knelt down, touching them with his finger. Hey, check this out, he called to Maya and Tommy. These symbols, they're different from the rest. They almost look like instructions. Maya joined him, kneeling beside the mirror. What do you mean? I'm not sure, Tommy admitted. But look at the way they're arranged. It's like they're guiding us towards something. Tommy leaned in, squinting at the symbols. But how do we read them? They're just pictures. Maybe it's not about reading them, Maya suggested. Maybe it's about understanding what they represent. These symbols could be clues, guiding us on how to use the mirror or how to bring them back. Sammy nodded, his mind racing. If that's true, then we need to figure out what these symbols mean, and fast. As they studied the symbols, Maya noticed that one of them depicted what looked like an eye, with lines radiating from it. Another symbol showed a key, and yet another depicted a pair of hands holding a small object, possibly a mirror or a jewel. Tommy pointed to the eye symbol. What if it means we need to see something, like really look at the mirror in a certain way? That makes sense, Maya agreed. And the key could represent a way to unlock whatever is hidden here. Maybe a mechanism or a hidden passage. Sammy's eyes lit up. And the hands holding the object. What if that shows us how to activate the mirror? Maybe there's something we need to place in front of it, or something we need to do with it. They worked together, trying to piece together the puzzle. Tommy's small hand brushed over the carvings on the mirror's frame, searching for anything that might give them a clue. As he touched a particular spot near the base, he felt a slight indentation, a small circular groove. Hey, there's something here, Tommy said excitedly. It feels like a button or a switch. Maya and Sammy crowded around, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Press it, Maya urged, but be ready for anything. Tommy hesitated for just a moment before pressing down on the indentation. There was a soft click, and the mirror surface rippled, as if responding to the touch. The carving on the frame began to glow faintly, the line illuminated with an earthly light. It's doing something, Sammy exclaimed, backing up slightly as the light intensified. The mirror surface shimmered, and the reflection of the chamber and the three kids began to distort. The symbols they have been studying lit up in sequence, the glow spreading across the mirror like a network of veins. The chamber's temperature seemed to drop, and the low hum filled the air. I think it's working, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. But what now? The mirror glow reached its peak, and for a moment it seemed like the entire chamber was vibrating with energy. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the light began to fade, and the mirror's surface returned to its normal reflective state. Sammy frowned. It didn't work. I didn't see anything different. But Tommy, who had been standing closest to the mirror, noticed something else. The reflection of the chamber in the mirror wasn't quite right. It was subtle, but there was a small difference. Shadows that didn't belong. Carvings on the wall that didn't match the real chamber. And then he saw it, a small dark shape in the corner of the mirror. Something that wasn't in the room itself. There! Tommy pointed at the shape in the mirror. There's something in the reflection that's not in the chamber. Maya and Sammy looked where he was pointing. Their eyes widened as they too saw the dark shape. It was barely noticeable, but it was different. Definitely there, lurking in the corner of the mirror's reflection. What is it? Maya asked, her voice tense. Sammy squinted, trying to make out the shape. I don't know, but it might be a clue. Maybe it's something hidden in the chamber, something we need to find. Maya nodded, her mind racing. Or it could be a portal, another way into the mirror realm, where we can reach Ethan, Lila and Professor Winter. But how do we get to it? Tommy asked, feeling both excited and scared. It's in the mirror, not here. Sammy's brow furrowed as he thought it over. Maybe it's like a reflection. We need to replicate what we see in the mirror here in the chamber. If we can match the reflection exactly, maybe we'll unlock whatever the dark shape is. Maya considered this. It's worth a shot. Let's look around and see if we can find anything that matches the reflection. There has to be something that corresponds to the dark shape. The three of them spread out, carefully examining every corner of the chamber. They looked for an object, marking, or features that might correspond to the anomaly in the mirror. As they moved closer to the spot where the dark shape appeared in the reflection, Maya noticed something on the floor, a faint outline of a square, almost invisible against the stone. Over here, she called, waving Sammy and Tommy over. There's something on the floor. It looks like a trapdoor. Sammy knelt down beside her, tracing the outline with his fingers. You're right, this could be it. But how do we open it? Tommy, who had been studying the symbols on the wall again, suddenly had an idea. What if we need to press the button again? Maybe it's like a key. It unlocks a trapdoor. Maya nodded. Let's try it. Tommy pressed the indentation once more, and the same low hum filled the air. This time, however, the outline of the trapdoor began to glow, revealing a set of faint lines that connected it to the mirror's frame. With a soft click, the trapdoor popped open, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading downwards. That's it, Sammy exclaimed. It's a hidden passage that must lead to wherever the dark shape is. Maya looked down the passage, her heart pounding. It's our only chance to save Ethan and the others. We have to go down there. Tommy swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. Let's do it. One by one, they descended into the passage, the darkness swallowing them as they moved further from the light of the chamber. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around them, but they pressed on, driven by the hope that they were getting closer to their friends. The passage was steep and narrow, and they had to move carefully to avoid slipping on the damp stone steps. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a small circular room. In the centre of the room was a pedestal, and on it a small, intricate carved box. This must be it, Maya whispered, stepping closer to the pedestal. Sammy reached out to touch the box, but Maya stopped him. Wait, we don't know what kind of traps or magic this thing might have. We have to be careful. Tommy looked around, his eyes narrowing as he noticed something on the wall of the room. More symbols, similar to the ones they had seen in the chamber above. Maybe these symbols can tell us how to safely open the box. Sammy nodded, moving to examine the symbols, while Maya and Tommy kept watching. As he studied them, a pattern began to emerge, a sequence of symbols that seemed to correspond with the carvings on the box. I think I've got it, Sammy said after a few tense minutes. There's a specific order we need to press on the box. If we get it right, it should open safely. Maya and Tommy watched anxiously as Sammy carefully pressed the symbols on the box in the order he had deciphered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the lid of the box lifted slightly. Sammy exhaled in relief. It worked! Maya reached out and slowly opened the box, revealing a small, ornate key inside. The key was old, made of some strange dark metal, and it pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow. This must be the key to whatever the dark shape in the mirror is, Maya said, her voice filled with awe. We have to take it back to the chamber and see if it unlocks something. With the key in hand, they carefully retraced their steps, climbing back up the passage to the chamber above. As they emerged, they noticed that the mirror was still shimmering slightly, as if it was waiting for them. "Let's see if the key does something," Myers said, holding the key up to the mirror. The moment the key touched the mirror's surface, the reflection began to change again. The dark shape in the corner started to move, slowly revealing itself as a door within the mirror. The three of them exchanged a look of hope and determination. This was it. The door could lead them to Ethan, Lila and Professor Winter, or it could be another trap. But they didn't have a choice. They had to try. With a deep breath, Maya pressed the key into the lock on the mirror door. The lock clicked and the door swung open, revealing a swirling vortex of light and shadow beyond. "Are you ready?" Maya asked, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. Tommy nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "We're ready." Sammy gave them a determined smile. "Let's go and get our friends back." And with that, they stepped through the door, plunged into the unknown as the mirror realm awaited them. Ethan and Lila's mirror realm was a nightmarish expanse of shifting shadows, flickering light, with ancient ruins that seemed to pulse with an eerie, malevolent energy. Ethan and Lila stood froze, their eyes wide with horror as they watched the scene unfold before them. Professor Amelia Winter lay on the cold stone floor of the chamber, her screams echoing through the chamber as a swarm of scarabs, small malevolent insects with chitinous glittering shells, crawled over her, their tiny legs scrabbling across her skin and their mandibles clicking with an insidious rhythm. The sight was grotesque, their dark form writhing in a frenzy as they devoured her flesh inch by inch. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he watched. His mind struggled to comprehend the horror before him. He wanted to move, to help her, but he felt paralysed by fear. Besides him, Lila was similarly rooted to the spot, her face pale, as she tried to process this nightmarish scene. "Professor Winter!" Ethan's voice broke through the dim. His cry was drowned out by Professor's blood-curdling screams. "We have to do something." Professor Winter, her eyes wide with terror and pain, turned her head towards them, her face streaked with tears and sweat. The scarabs were crawling over her shoulders, her neck, and now her face. Each bite elicited a fresh scream, and her pleas were desperate and urgent. "Run!" she shouted through the glittering teeth, her voice trembling with agony. "Get to the mirror! Get out of here!" Ethan's throat tightened. "No, we can't leave you here." But the professor's words were a command, not a plea. "Go now!" she insisted, her voice growing weaker as the scarabs continued their horrific feast. Her struggles grew weaker and her movement became more frantic. As the insects advanced, their relentless assault stripping away her strength. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, her face a mask of fear and determination. "Ethan, she's right. We can't help her. We need to get out here and find the others." Ethan tore his gaze away from the professor's anguished face, tears stinging his eyes. He felt a pang of guilt, a burning sensation of helplessness, as he saw the professor's brave, noble figure slowly being overwhelmed. But Lila's grip was firm and her words cut through his gaze. "We have to go," Lila said urgently. "If we don't, we'll be next." With a last tormented look at the professor, Ethan nodded, his resolve hardened despite the tears that blurred his vision. They turned and ran, their footsteps echoing through the ancient ruins as they made their way back towards the mirror. The chamber seemed to stretch endlessly before them, a labyrinth of shadows and crumbling stone. The mirror's surface was still visible in the distance, a glimmer of hope in the midst of the darkness. Ethan's heart raced, and he and Lila pushed themselves to move faster, desperation driving their every step. Behind them, the professor's scream grew fainter, shallowed by the growing distance. The scarabs had consumed her voice, and all that remained were the sounds of their relentless scuttering, a grim reminder of the horrors they had left behind. Finally they had reached the mirror, the once familiar surface now shimmering with an unsettling otherworldly light. Ethan could see the faint outline of the chamber they had left, the reflection showing the stark contrast of their reality against the mirror realm's distorted horror. Ethan grabbed Lila's hand, their fingers interlocked as they approached the mirror. "This is it," he said, his voice trembling. "We have to go." Lila nodded, her eyes fixed on the mirror's surface. "Let's go." With a final lingering glance at the mirror realm, Ethan and Lila stepped through the reflective surface, their bodies passing through the barrier between worlds. As they emerged back into the chamber, the oppressive darkness of the mirror realm receded, replaced by the familiar, albeit distressing reality of the ancient tomb. Their breaths came in range of gasps, their bodies shaking from the adrenaline and the horror they had just witnessed. Ethan felt a heavy weight in his chest. The crushing guilt of leaving Professor Winter behind gaunted at him, but there was no time to dwell on it now. Ethan and Lila stumbled into the chamber, expecting to find the others, Sammy, Maya and Tommy, but they were met with a chilling silence. The chamber, once bustling with activity, was now eerily empty. The ancient symbols that had been illuminated by the chamber's light was now dark, and the space seemed cold and lifeless. "Where is everyone?" Ethan's voice was a mixture of panic and confusion. He looked around frantically, his eyes darting from corner to corner, but there was no sign of their friends. The tension in the room was palpable, the absence of the others a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Lila's face mirrored Ethan's fear. "They were supposed to be here. They must have come back to the chamber while we were in the mirror realm." Ethan's heart sank as he took in the emptiness around them. "We need to find them. They could be in danger." They moved through the chamber, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Each room they checked was deserted, the silence pressing in on them. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming, a stark reminder of the perils they faced. Ethan and Leah exchanged glances. "We need to find a way to figure out where they went," Ethan said, his voice steady as he tried to focus on the task at hand. "There has to be some clue here, something that can tell us where they went." They began to search the chamber more thoroughly, examining every surface and crevice. Ethan's eyes fell upon the pedestal where the ancient mirror had once stood, now empty and cold. Lila examined the wall carvings, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns. As they investigated, Ethan's thoughts raced. The chamber had seemed like a place of safety before, but now it felt like a trap, a place where their friends might have fallen victim to some unknown peril. They had to find them quickly. "What if the chamber has changed while we were gone?" Lila suggested. "What if they are now new clues or traps?" Ethan nodded. "We need to be careful. Let's check for anything unusual, any signs of recent activity or disturbance." They moved cautiously through the chamber, their eyes scanning for anything out of the ordinary. The chamber's layout had shifted slightly, with some passages now blocked and others newly revealed. Ethan spotted a series of fresh scratch marks on the stone floor, leading towards a hidden alcove. "Look, here," he said, pointing to the marks. "They must be recent. They might lead us to where the others went." They followed the marks to the alcove, which revealed a small concealed passageway. The walls were lined with more ancient symbols, and at the end of the passageway was a heavy stone door, partly open. Ethan and Lila exchanged a look of hope and determination. "This has to be it," Ethan said. "Let's see what's on the other side." They pushed the door open and stepped into the passageway, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The passage was narrow and winding, leading them deeper into the bowels of the ancient tomb. The air was thick with dust and the sense of ages past. At the end of the passageway, they emerged into another chamber, larger and more ornate than the previous one. The walls were covered with elaborate frescoes, depicting a scene of ancient rituals and battles. In the centre of the chamber was a large circular platform with a pedestal. Ethan's eyes were drawn to the pedestal, where a single ancient scroll lay. The scroll was partly unrolled, revealing intricate glowing symbols. Lila moved closer, her face illuminated by the soft golden light emitted from the scroll. "This must be important," Lila said, carefully picking up the scroll. "It could hold the key to finding the others." Ethan's eyes scanned the chamber, taking in the intricate stone tablet embedded in the walls. Each tablet was covered in ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint otherworldly light. He knew these symbols might hold the key to understanding what had happened and where their friends had gone. "Lila," Ethan said, his voice trembling but resolute, "we need to figure this out. The symbols might help us find the others, or at least understand what happened here." Lila nodded, her face pale and her eyes haunted by the memory of Professor Winter's screams. She took a deep breath and approached the scroll they had found earlier, her hands shaking as she unrolled it further. The symbols on the scroll mirrored those on the stone tablets, and she began to work on translating them. As Lila worked, Ethan moved to the stone tablets, examining each one closely, his fingers tracing the ancient carvings, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. The chamber seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing darker and the air colder as the sense of dread deepened. Despite the urgency of the task, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of despair that gripped him. The image of Professor Winter, overwhelmed by the scarabs, what edged into his mind. The professor's finest anguish screams seemed to echo in his ears, a haunting reminder of the dangers they faced. Leah's tears began to flow as she worked, the weight of their situation became unbearable. Her translational efforts grew increasingly erratic, her sobs punctuating her attempts to decipher the symbols. She tried to hold it together, but the emotional strain was too much. Ethan noticed Lila's distress and moved to her side. His heart ached for her. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, trying to offer some semblance of solace. "Lila," he said softly, "I know this is hard. We've seen so much already, and it's taking its toll, but we need to stay strong. We have to find the others, for their sake and for ours." Lila looked up at Ethan, his eyes red and swollen. I can't stop thinking about her. She was," her voice cracked as she buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the wave of grief and terror. Ethan gently pulled Lila into an embrace, his own emotions threatened to overwhelm him. He held her close, his heart breaking for her and for the loss they had just experienced. His arms wrapped around her in a tightly hug, offering her the comfort he knew she desperately needed. "It's okay to be scared," Ethan whispered, his voice tender. "It's okay to cry. We've been through so much, and it's all right to feel this way. But we have to keep going. We have to find our friends and make sure the sacrifice wasn't in vain." Lila nodded against his chest, her sobs slowly subsiding. She clung to Ethan, drawing strength from his presence. The comforting warmth of his embrace helped to steady her, even if only slightly. After a few moments, Lila pulled back slightly, her face still streaked with tears, but her expression resolute. "You're right. We can't give up now. We have to finish this." Ethan gently wiped the tears from Lila's cheek with his thumb, his touch tender and soothing. His gaze, full of unwavering support, met hers. "We're in this together," he said softly. "We'll find them, I promise." As his words lingered in the air, Ethan leaned in, his heart full of affection and hope. He pressed his lips to hers in a long, tender kiss, feeling the warmth of her tears mingling with his own. The softness of the moment lingered between them, and as they pulled back, their eyes locked in a shared smile, their hearts finding solace in each other's presence. With renewed determination, Lila took a deep breath and refocused on the scroll. Ethan joined her, their combined efforts bringing a sense of purpose amidst the grief. They worked side by side, deciphering the symbols and aligning them with those on the stone tablets. The process was painstaking and fraught with tension. Every symbol they deciphered seemed to unlock another layer of mystery, and the sense of urgency grew with each passing moment. Ethan and Lila's hand moved with precision, their minds sharp despite their emotional toll. As they completed the sequence, the chamber responded with a deep rumble. The ground beneath them vibrated, and a hidden passage began to reveal itself. The stone wall slid apart, revealing a dark corridor that led deep into the tomb. They knew that this was only the beginning of their journey, but the discovery of a passageway offered a glimmer of hope. "Let's see where this leads," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "We need to find our friends and figure out what's going on." Lila nodded, her resolve strengthened by Ethan's support. "Yes, let's go." They stepped into the newly revealed passage, their hearts heavy but their spirits buoyed by the sense of purpose. The corridor was narrow and dimly lit, with ancient carvings that seemed to come alive in the flickering light of their torches. As they ventured deep, the weight of their loss and the fear of the unknown lingered in their minds, but with each step they clung to the hope that they would find their friends and uncover the secrets of the ancient tomb. The challenges that lay ahead were daunting, but Ethan and Lila faced them with a fierce determination, driven by the memory of Professor Winter and the bonds of friendship that bound them together.